one of the tenets of Stoicism is to accept the world as it is.
Yeah.
And that is something that Mandy and I struggle with. Like, there is an ideal way the justice system is supposed to work. When people romanticize the justice system, as they often do in our circles, like, oh, well, it's imperfect, but it does these things. And it's like, but it also does these awful things to people.
Yeah.
How would you describe to somebody how you were able to accept the world as it is and extend that compassion at the same time? Like, how do you describe that to somebody?
Great question. And I think that the problem is the word accept, because I feel like when people hear the word accept, what they hear is tolerate. And this is actually a really interesting thing that happened between me and my mom when I was in prison. So like after I was convicted, I had this sort of existential crisis, and I realized like, oh my God, I'm not just living somebody else's life by mistake. I am like in prison, and this is my life, and it's not fair, and it's sad, and I have to accept that. And when I tried to talk to my mom about this, like what she interpreted that to mean was that I was depressed and that I was giving up. And that was not true. What it meant in a practical sense was that I was getting up in the morning and I was living my life. I was taking responsibility for how I was going to interact in the world, acknowledging my circumstances. I feel like acknowledge is the better word than accept, because I feel like once you accept reality as it is, you can actually be a more effective agent of change. Because if you are living in this mental state where you are just looking at how the world is different than the way it should be, and you have this vision of the way the world should be, and you are focused on that, you are not actually engaging with the world as it is. And so you have this, I think, one, it causes you a lot of unnecessary suffering. So I think one of the things that are the silver linings of my prison experience is I could not afford to suffer more than I was already suffering. And so I was like, I am not going to make myself suffer more just because of like internal things in my mind. I'm not going to torture myself imagining the life that I want to be living. I am instead going to look directly at the life that I have and say, how can I make this life worth living? Okay? How can I make my situation better with the acknowledgement that I actually physically can't open my door? I can't. Like, I that is not within my realm of possibility, but what is? And I think that that is the difference, is acknowledging what is allows you to more effectively engage with what is and gives you the possibility to find opportunities within those limitations that you wouldn't otherwise see if you were so focused on what should be. So that's how I would talk about bringing Stoicism, but also like a sort of Zen Buddhist attitude into this equation. You just sit and try to see clearly what is in front of you. And seeing clearly requires that you acknowledge uncomfortable truths, and then you acknowledge what is within your capacity to change versus not. And then you make your best choices from there.
I love that so much.
Wow.
Thank you for explaining that way.
Yeah. I need to put that, like, I'm going to save that recording and remember it.
I don't even remember what I just said.
Life lessons with Amanda Knox, how to survive.
I talk about a lot of these things in my book that's coming out in March. Is like the big question at the heart of that book is, now that I'm technically free, now what? How do I feel free in a world that makes me feel limited and boxed in, and like I don't have agency over my own life, over my own identity? How do you regain that sense of agency? And a lot of it is like coming to terms with these kinds of ideas that I just mentioned.